Later with Mo Kelly on KFI AM 640.
And there are some things you just don't do. There are some things you just do not ever do. And I like to use relationships because everyone's been in a relationship. Not everyone has worked for an elected official or been to a press briefing in a professional capacity or attended a city council meeting. Not everyone has those experiences to draw upon. But as surely as you can hear me, Sam, Carnisha, Tawala, Stefan, even Mark, everyone you know who is not a child. Well, Mark is kind of a child. But outside of that, everyone's been in a relationship. And there are some things you just don't do. Like, for example, you don't invite exes to your wedding. You don't date exes of your friends. And they're not hard and fast rules, but, like put it this way. It's like put on a wedding invitation right next to formal attire, reception at 4 p.m., no kids or people who you've previously slept with the bride or groom. It's not a hard and fast rule. But what is it? It's a courtesy. It's a level of respect. It's a norm. It's a tradition that most of us kind of know. Don't need to be told. And let me stay with weddings for a second. Women pretty much know that you don't wear white to someone else's wedding. And Carnisha's shaking her head. She knows what I'm talking about. You don't try to upstage the bride. And oh, yes, I've seen it. Doesn't make it any less cringy. There are some things you just don't do. And if the expected attire on that invitation I told you about says formal or semi-formal attire, that doesn't mean show up in a bikini or Speedo. Why? Because there are some things, say it with me, you just don't do. Because you respect either the person, the tradition, or both. This country, and I'm getting to the point, does not have any more dignity, decency, or decorum, and does not see any value in it. There used to be a time that we would laugh at like the South Korean National Assembly or the British Parliament and how members would openly jeer and physically confront each other, sometimes even coming to blows. Remember, we used to laugh at that. We, the United States of America, used to laugh at other countries and their incivility because we, in our haughty arrogance, saw ourselves above such indignity, indecency, and indecorum because that would never happen here, so we thought. And I remember a very young congressman by the name of Lindsey Graham back in 1998 during the Bill Clinton impeachment made this appeal to our higher beliefs about what we expect out of the Oval Office, our institutions, talking about, we had a moral responsibility. We need to bring respect back to the institution of the presidency. We need to cleanse the Oval Office. Talked about cleansing, honor, integrity, these high-minded ideals.
Because impeachment is not about punishment. Impeachment is about cleansing the office. Impeachment is about restoring honor and integrity to the office.
But we're not in that country anymore, even though many of those same people in office then are in office now. Back in 1998, I'm sure that the incident between the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, and Senator Alex Padilla, that would have never happened. It would never have happened. It would have been unthinkable and unconscionable. It would have never risen to the perceived need to forcibly remove a senior senator from a room and place him in handcuffs. It would have never happened. But you know what? We're not that country anymore. We are a shameless nation, lacking the self-awareness to best appreciate the value of shame. Shame is valuable. Let me go back to that wedding analogy I keep talking about. Imagine you're a guest at a wedding for a close family member, a friend. Let's say you're a groomsman or a bridesmaid, and you get into a fist fight with someone on the dance floor. Shame would remind you that it should have never happened, regardless who may have been right or wrong. That was a solution available other than a fight. But now you've embarrassed yourself, you've embarrassed your spouse, you've embarrassed your date, your family, your friends, colleagues, and ruined somebody's wedding. But when you don't have any shame, none of that matters. Here's the problem when you no longer have any shame. There is no bottom. There is no bottom. There is nothing off limits. Why not have a fist fight on the congressional floor? Why not arrest any member of Congress who asks a question at your press conference that you don't approve of because they walk forward somewhat aggressively? Why not manhandle anyone you want anywhere because nothing matters anymore? Imagine standing up at the State of the Union and then yelling out a question at the president, whoever the president is, and then forcibly removed and handcuffed in congressional chambers. I don't know. I can't love this country more than it is willing to love itself. Impolitic and uncomfortable questions happen at every single town hall, every single council meeting, every elected official or appointee's press conference, every single one. I've covered them. They happen every single time. Because if what happened today, the physical manhandling of Senator Padilla with no self-reflection, is deemed okay and acceptable, then we've lost our way as a country. And I don't think there's any way back. There is no then shining city on a hill. There is no American exceptionalism if that is who we are right now. There is no great America to get back to or make ourselves back into. Because if today, just today, is a supposed step closer to making America great again, then in fact, we were never great and just another one of those countries we used to laugh at. Because we would then be no better than them. You know, the same countries which have since passed us in education, passed us in healthcare, passed us in technology, and most importantly, in economic strength. We used to laugh at them, but now we're behind them in all those leading indicators. I can't care about this country more than it does itself. And you cannot shame those who have no shame. You may now kiss the bride. For KFI AM 640, I'm Mo Kelly. America is such a fickle place. It is a place founded on protest. In fact, founded on a violent protest, truth be told. Boston Tea Party, American Revolution, War of 1812, Civil War, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. All were varying levels of violent protest. And every major move forward in this country's bid to form a more perfect union has been thanks to, say it with me, protest. And in every single instance, the status quo at the time resisted it. Every single time. Here are just a few examples. I'm talking to you on a Monday, after a weekend in which we did what we wanted, including protest, celebrated Father's Day, went to the movies, whatever. The modern concept of the weekend, Saturday and Sunday off, primarily arose from the Industrial Revolution in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Initially, factory workers, many of whom were former farmers, disliked the whole idea of a 7-day work week. When the 1929 stock market crash crippled the world economy, the resulting Great Depression led to mass strikes in response to rising unemployment and poverty, among other things. Strikes, of course, are protests by another name. Long story short, President FDR signed the Fair Labor Standards Act into law in 1938. Imagine that. Protests. Women all around the country mostly either voted for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris in 2024. But the women's suffrage movement included peaceful protests, lobbying, civil disobedience, and it took decades of agitation, in other words, protests, to get the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution in 1920. Women's suffrage was a wildly unpopular movement in the beginning. Women voting? America was not having it. But here we are today. Protests, and the status quo resisted. It was uncomfortable for the country, but when it's uncomfortable, it means the Constitution is doing its job. The modern civil rights movement, you've heard me reference it many times. Lots of marches, protests, civil disobedience, even riots. The height of constitutional discomfort in America, I would argue. The status quo resisted every step of the way. Most people don't know. The civil rights and ending segregation was not supported by the majority of Americans when the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964. Most people were not down with that cause. You should sense a theme here. Protests have never been popular. Never. Because if they were, we wouldn't need them in the first place. Just about everything we call normal today was wildly unpopular yesterday. The people who are not protesting are never appreciative of those who protest or their methods. That's just a fact in every instance. The mass protest against the Vietnam War didn't end the war, but it surely shaped American foreign policy. The more unpopular the war became, the more prevalent the protests became, the more it hastened our withdrawal at the end. Maybe you're old enough to remember how uncomfortable it was in America during the late 1960s and early 1970s. Let me keep going. The gay rights movement, another great example. Pride Month, as in like right now, and how far we've come does not happen without the protests, the riots, and backlash to the police raids of gay bars and the denial of service to openly gay people. The 56th anniversary of the Stonewall riots is just days away. Protests and American discomfort have historically gone hand in hand. 2025, no different. It's a continuation of what I would call an American tradition. Now, that's not just to say that because you protest, you'll eventually succeed, or that every issue is worthy of support. Not at all. I am saying, though, that protest is what makes America America. It's affirmation that the Constitution is doing its job. And that's assuming that the three branches of our government all do their jobs. Otherwise, the Constitution means nothing. Everybody's got to pull their own weight. And I say all this to say, against the backdrop of what we were all watching and seeing and experiencing over the weekend, protest is never bad for America or a sign that we're on our way to hell in a handbasket. It says to me that America and Americans remember where they came from, and the country is continuously evolving relative to the issues of the day. The people originally denied human rights now have human rights in this country. The people who were once denied citizenship now have citizenship. The people who could not vote can now vote. The people who could not own land or buy property in any neighborhood as other Americans now can. The people who could not marry whoever they wanted can now marry whoever they want. And it's been a process. Don't act like America doesn't have further room for improvement or we've arrived, because that's not true. Women, now really pay attention to this. Women only gain the right to open a checking account without their husband's permission in 1974. That's within my lifetime. I remember 1974. The Godfather Part 2 came out in 1974. Hold on to your butts on this one. Mississippi didn't ratify the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, until 2013. 2013. That was during Obama's second term. So, oh yes, protest still has a role in 2025. And yes, it will be uncomfortable, just as the Constitution promises, because of, that First Amendment. This country was never great without protest, only thanks to it. For KFI AM 640, I'm Mo Kelly. Amazon chief executive Andy Jassy told employees in a memo earlier today that he expects artificial intelligence to thin their ranks, reducing headcount. If you didn't know, Amazon is the country's second largest employer. I don't know if you caught that, but Jassy just virtually told everyone at the company that they were expendable and many jobs will be gone forever due to AI, and that Amazon is actively planning to incorporate it at all levels of their business. Here's from the memo. This is Jassy, the CEO, talking. Quote, in the next few years, we expect that this will reduce our total corporate workforce as we get efficiency gains from using AI extensively across the company. Close quote. So when I say that AI is going to recalibrate our economy and take away some jobs forever, Mark, you didn't want to believe me. This is, in fact, inevitable, even though you don't like hearing that, Mark. This isn't a marketing strategy. It is a business holy grail for them. What was the saying? You can have two of the three. You can get faster, get better. You can get cheaper, but only two of the three. Well, AI potentially means you can have all three. while permanently eliminating complete employee classifications. No more paying employees, no more payroll taxes, no more benefits, no more paying out vacation time. Hell, no more loss of productivity to vacations, no more overtime or weekends off, no more 401k matching funds, no more disability leave, no more costly Christmas parties, no more uncomfortable conversations about raises, no more strikes. There is literally no downside for a company to integrate AI. And presumably it gets better and better at any job it is given because it learns with more data input. But don't lose the plot. Andy Jassy is just saying the quiet part out loud. Your company is doing the same thing right now. Maybe it just hasn't announced it yet. Any service industry is looking to decrease employee-related expenses, their largest expenditure, their largest variable cost. You thought Amazon didn't pay its employees enough before? Wait until Amazon gets a hold of HAL 9000 or Mother from the Nostromo. That's an Alien reference. You probably thought it was all fun and games when IBM's Watson was winning on Jeopardy! What you failed to see was that AI wasn't just about winning digital chess games or answering trivia. It has always been about rendering a workforce obsolete. That's it. Now, Mark probably disagrees with this when I say that there are benefits. I can't help but wonder what AI will do in the field of medical research and curing diseases. We're seeing in real time what it is doing for transportation in the form of autonomous vehicles. But even that means the end of cab drivers, truck drivers, rideshare drivers, delivery drivers as we know them. Yes, Amazon will eventually replace their delivery drivers. You bet your ass they will. Those plans are already in place. They just haven't been shared publicly. Because AI is the answer to every sordid capitalistic dream connected to corporate greed. That is where Mark is right. He can't have it both ways. You can't assail capitalism because of its greed and not know that AI is the answer to all of their problems. Whereas economies have always evolved with the introduction of technology. For example, there are no more long distance operators, no more elevator operators, no more traffic light operators. People found other jobs to do in other industries, but that was then. This is about eliminating the labor force today as we know it. The moment that AI and robotics get on the same page, there will not be enough jobs for this country. They just don't want to tell you that uncomfortable truth because the truth would panic markets and destroy any semblance of economic stability. How do you tell the American labor force, which numbers around 170 million people right now in 2025, that a high percentage of all their jobs will not exist in 30 years, probably fewer? Now, if you're my age or Mark's age, that doesn't really impact us. We'll be out of the labor force in 30 years. One way or the other, we will be out. But your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, they're in school right now. It will be life-defining. Amazon just told you what is on the horizon. No, wait, check that. Amazon just told you what is already here. And your jobs will not be long for this world. Because AI isn't about creating new jobs. It's creating new ways to eradicate your jobs altogether. That's the uncomfortable truth. Mark says it's inevitable, but it doesn't mean we have to just roll over and accept it and just lay back and enjoy it or something like that, some crude sexual reference. But I get his point. We should put up a fight, absolutely. But there's some fights you can't win, and this would be one of them. Now, is there a way that we can better integrate it so we don't all lose our jobs at the same time? Maybe, possibly. But AI in and of itself may not be real. But believe me, its impact is very much so real. And that's not going to change anytime soon. And it doesn't matter if I want to fight it, if Nick wants to fight it, Mark wants to fight it, Tawala, name anyone. The job that we have right now, whatever it is, there's a good chance it's not going to be here in 30 years. Radio show host, AI will make sure it will not exist in 30 years. Probably fewer. And I hate to break it to you, Mark, news anchors won't be here either.
I am the John Connor of news anchors, and I will fight it to the end.
For KFI AM 640, I'm Mo Kelly. remember it vividly. I'm old enough to remember the Iran hostage crisis. November 4th, 1979, when Iranian militants seized the U.S. embassy in Tehran and took 66 Americans hostage. 52 eventually remained for the total 444 days. I remember the great Paul Harvey giving news updates along the way. He was a magnificent newsman and storyteller. Growing up, talk radio was my only real reference point as to U.S. and Iranian relations. By the time I got to high school, I learned a little bit more of the fullness of the history, how we, as in the United States, helped stage a coup in 1953, overthrowing, get this, an Iranian democratically elected prime minister with the goal of installing a U.S.-friendly dictator. Imagine that. We overthrew, the United States, overthrew an actual democracy to instead put in a dictator. Isn't it supposed to work in the other direction? Weren't we supposedly in the business of exporting democracy? Not in 1953, we weren't. But it was then that we as in the CIA, along with the British MI6, installed the Shah of Iran. And Shah is Persian for king. The same Shah who was eventually overthrown in 1979 during the Iranian Revolution. The reasoning was that a U.S.-friendly dictator better served our interests, wink, wink, in the Cold War against the Soviet Union. We'd have a puppet friend in the region, and it would be a bulwark against further Soviet expansion, which was a thing back then. Iran bordered the Soviet Union. The newly installed Shah was only 22 years old. Imagine that. The plan was that he would provide stability for possibly 50 to 60 years. And by stability, I mean the constant flow of oil. But long story short, when anyone should talk about the history between the U.S. and Iran, it is most definitely complicated, and it traces all the way back to 1953, not 1979, because there's no 79 without 53. But then there's also 1980. When the U.S. backed Saddam Hussein in the Iraq versus Iran war. Yes, that very same Saddam Hussein. That was our way of getting back at the new Iranian leadership, the Ayatollah Khomeini, because we couldn't do it directly. We couldn't go at Iran directly. Here's why. The Algiers Accords of January 19th, 1981, and if you know your history, that was one day before Ronald Reagan was inaugurated as president. Well, the accords were signed to formally end the hostage crisis, but it had stipulations. Chiefly, the U.S. would not intervene politically or militarily in Iranian internal affairs going forward, at least not directly. Hence the backing of Saddam Hussein in that proxy war. Hence the freezing of Iranian assets in the U.S. and sanctions for various reasons then and since over the decades. What is often overlooked in the telling of the U.S.-Iran history is that Iran's nuclear program originally began in the 1950s under the Shah, and its chief supporter, say it with me, the United States. We helped start Iran's nuclear program. Back then, as I said, Iran shared a border with the Soviet Union. The U.S. couldn't put nukes in Iran. That would be like putting nukes in Cuba like the Soviet Union did years later, and that led to the Cuban Missile Crisis. But if Iran were to, wink, wink, develop nuclear weapons on its own, the geopolitical benefits at that time of a Western supporting Shah installed by the U.S. having nuclear weapons had all sorts of short-term and long-term benefits. But that same nuclear program that was started in the 1950s is now the chief item of contention a half century later. I know, it's complicated. So when Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says and has been saying that Iran is on the verge of a nuclear weapon, yeah, they've been at that doorstep for decades. It's not an exaggeration. But here's the thing that they leave out: with a lot of help from us. That's one uncomfortable truth. Iran didn't have to start from scratch. Their original reactors were ordered shut down after the 1979 Iranian Revolution, but the program was restarted in secret in the 1980s during the Iran-Iraq War. Now, you tell me. Do you really think it takes 45 plus years to get a nuclear bomb when you've been working on it since maybe 1980? So when Iran says publicly that its nuclear ambitions are directly tied to the eradication of Israel, it's fair to say Israel's concerns are warranted. But the U.S. helped create this Frankenstein monster. That's what's always left out. We didn't become geopolitical enemies in 1979 out of nowhere. And Iran didn't start working on a bomb in the 1990s. It was well before that. Both are lies. So here's the truth. The bombing of Iran by Israel that we're talking about today was a long time coming. It was always leading to this moment. The involvement of the U.S. in this bombing was also inevitable because of the history leading up to this moment. There was never a scenario in which a war with Iran was not also going to include the U.S. on some level. And Donald Trump is going to jump at the chance. I don't care what he said while he was campaigning. He wants this. Our involvement may not include boots on the ground, but we have been headed in this direction since 1979. And we're sure as hell not going to stop now.
Now you know the rest of the story.
For KFI AM 640, I'm Mo Kelly.